today. My name is Amanda, and we're going to be talking about our series on vision. So, Amanda, I'm going to go ahead and come on up here. You can go ahead and do your intro. That'd be great.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, before we get started, does everyone just want to take a deep breath? Just yeah? All right. Yeah, let's, it's the morning, it's Friday. I'm sure that you have a long list of things to do today, and if not, then happy Friday. I'm glad that you just get to come and hang out with us this morning, and then, I don't want to say chill for the rest of the day if your boss is in the room, but yeah. Well, good morning. Like I said, my name is Amanda Brezzell, and we'll get into it. So today, my talk is going to be called Incorrigible Disturbers, and you guys will see in just a minute why I chose that title. Okay, so I am the co-founder and creative director over at Finnegan's Farms. We're a sustainable agricultural design firm. We do development as well. Most of the work that we focus on is redesigning spaces for displacement using an earth and community-centered approach. I also co-own an urban farm with my siblings, and there we are able to grow different sustainable materials and talk about our design as well. In addition to that, I wear many hats, but in addition to that, I also worked on national agricultural policy, food systems work, so anything that has to deal with food moving around the United States, food moving around Detroit more specifically, that's me. I sit in those rooms and get in our Congress people's faces. I won't say the other end. But yeah, that's a lot of the work that I do. I'm also, first and foremost, honestly, a queer Black Detroiter. I'm gonna be that so till the day I die. I also do art. My art is right behind me here. And then I mentioned before, I do own a urban farm. I do community building, and then I'm a lover as well. And that is really central to the work that I do. So no matter what I'm working on, my work really just manifests, no matter how it manifests, all of the work that I do is because of my love for humanity and my deep commitment to my community. And I started my design firm really to build community resilience and to offer folks a more sustainable approach to how we take care of community. So when I was first approached to do Creative Mornings, Taylor mentioned to me that the theme was vision. When I think vision, I'm thinking about daydreaming. I personally believe that daydreaming is something that is a tool that we can use for resistance and to build a revolution. And so I take that very seriously. Vision also involves planning for the future and honestly just like developing a true imagination. I personally believe that art is political, and I'm going to talk about that. And so when we move our art from the realm of the imagination into the physical and the material world, we do have a responsibility to our communities for what we're creating and what we're presenting. And so today I really wanted to talk about what is the role of the artist in the actual development and the implementation of a liberated vision for the future that we have. So I really wanted to base my talk off of ancestor James Baldwin. He wrote something, and as creatives, you might be familiar with this work. It's called The Creative Process. It was written in 1962. And the whole point of this essay that he wrote was really to talk to artists about critiquing society and using that critique to move forward into a better society. So I have 4 takeaways for you guys today. And there are that the artist's role really is to document history, to create spaces for self-expression, and to be an incorrigible disturber of peace, and also to love. So let's dig into those. All right, so the role of the artist is to document history. So we're talking more about, like, yes, we can take the pictures and things like that, but Baldwin in his writing really highlights the importance of capturing the true essence of our time. And no matter where you look or how you look at it, we are living in a really revolutionary time right now. And so because we are living in this time and because we're artists and creatives, part of our duty is to document the true story of what is happening right now in our time. Our history can be told from many perspectives, but at the end of the day, the truth is always the truth. And so, in our work, it is important, especially as artists in America, to tell the history of what has happened here and to continue to tell the truth of that history so that we can present that in our work and make sure that true history is documented. Our role is to really just to make sure that the real story is told. So take the picture, record the audio, write the book, but I will urge you to always tell the truth. Right. Our other role is to create spaces for self-expression. Our responsibility to society comes from our responsibilities to ourselves first and foremost. And so the way that you treat yourself is absolutely going to translate into the way that you treat society at large. And our role as artists is to examine what in society keeps us back from actually expressing ourselves and being our true selves in society. And so when we turn inward and we're able to explore the things that are holding us back, it's our duty as artists to then address that in our work and say, no, well, if this exists to keep me down, I'm going to push back on that. I'm going to say, no, let's create a space where we can be loving, where we can be queer, where we can be black, where we can be our full selves without having to internalize all of these things coming in from society about who we are and are not allowed to be. It's really more than making art. Some folks will belittle themselves and say, "Oh, I just made that thing," or like I just did this, and it's not just art. It's an expression of what you have inside, and it's worth being shared. And when you do have the platform to share those things, I encourage you to use that to carve out spaces that actually tend to the well-being of society, versus just saying, "And this is just something I made, and it's cute." It can be more than that. And yes, there are pieces behind me here that I made because I think that they're very cute. But when we dig deeper into the stories behind this art, it gives a more broad picture of who I am. And that in and of itself is a revolutionary act. And I can talk a little bit more about that. So in this work, our goal is to make sure that we're able to deeply explore ourselves and then challenge anything that pushes back on our ability to express ourselves. There we go. The other role of an artist is to be an incorrigible disturber of peace. And this is one of the central points to what Baldwin was explaining in his essay. Because when we're talking about peace, we're not talking about peace as in we're all getting along and we're all sitting together. We're talking about complacency. We're talking about the facade of peace that is given to us, whether in the media or just in what society says. If you look around, you can watch the news on one platform and they will tell you that everything is fine. There was a hurricane over here and we're taking care of it and it's fine. But then if you can flip to TikTok or to Instagram or to someone else who is really trying to tell the truth, and you'll see that the world is actually on one side on fire and on the other side it's flooded. So we actually have to be engaged in what we're seeing and critique that. So we aren't walking into a space and saying, "Hey, everyone's happy here. I'm going to flip the table." We're going to say, "Hey, is everyone happy here? Like let's dig into that." And that can make a lot of people uncomfortable. So Baldwin explains that our role as artists is to actually hold a mirror to society and to challenge that complacency. The work that we do should address social issues and challenge systems that shape our identity. He also states that an artist is their own test tube, they're their own laboratory, and he highlights that in a way to just explain that we do walk to the beat of our own drum. But I'll take that a step further and say that just walking to the beat of your own drum is not a revolutionary act. It can be a form of resistance, especially when who you are is in direct opposition to the status quo. However, just showing up and being who you are at this point in time is just not enough. And so what he's explaining is that society's response to change is panic. And so when you can feel that and you know that like I'm going to come and disrupt this space, it's going to cause all this panic, you kind of have to be prepared for that and be prepared for that backlash, but stand in that and really honestly stand on business and say, I know that this is disruptive. However, my people aren't free, my community is not safe, and so I'm going to speak up, I'm going to say something. As I said, it's not enough to simply exist and play your own game. We must take it a step further and constantly ask questions. Our work really should expose the questions that the answer hides. That's another quote from this writing. And he was saying that because we should be committed to challenging what's in front of us and then go deeper into understanding and exposing these systems that cause harm. It's not enough to just accept the answer that people are giving you. Figure out what question they're answering in the first place and why that's the answer. Let's see. All right, and my personal favorite, the role of the artist is to love. This is my favorite quote. It says, "The role of the artist is exactly the same as the role of the artist. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you don't see." And so I personally believe in Bell Hooks' definition of love that reframes love as an act, as a verb. It is something that we are actively doing. It is not just, oh, I love you. When I say I love you, there are a series of actions that follow those words. And so it involves changing, taking the theory of love and actually putting that into action. And if you go further into it, it's often referred to as love as praxis. And so I personally believe that we can't create any visions of a liberated future in a space where love is absent. And so, as artists, our role is to love humanity and the exploration of the human experience to such a level that it calls us to put this kind of love in action. And this kind of love does tell us to tell the truth of our history and to preserve it as a sacred text. This love also calls us to carve out spaces for self expression safely. This love also calls us to disrupt and dismantle systems that cause harm. And at the end of the day, there's another quote that he wrote that says, "Societies never know it, but the war of an artist with his society is a lover's war." And he does, at his best, what lovers do, which is to reveal the beloved to himself, and with that revelation, make freedom real. And so, I'll leave you with this. Ask yourself how your commitment to your vision of the future shows up in your work, especially if your vision of the future is like mine, and especially if your vision of the future looks free. So it's not just art, remember that. And I will also say, continue to disturb the peace. Use your platform to disrupt this. There's a lot going on right now, and there's always going to be a lot going on. We live, again, in a revolutionary age, and when you have the platform, when you've got the paint, when you've got the materials, I personally believe that it's our duty to show up for society and to love society in such a way that calls us to act, and that calls us to dismantle the things that keep us from being our truest selves, especially when we're working toward freedom. So, thank you. And then I just have some, yep. I was gonna leave the last few minutes for questions if anyone wanted to dig in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. Round of applause for Amanda first. That was so great. Okay, yes. And I would absolutely love to open it up for questions. Will you really quickly tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing on the day to day? And then I'm going to open it up for questions.
For sure.
Yeah, I know there's a lot.
You're right. So let's see. What does my normal day look like? I don't know. Breakfast. I don't know. Okay. So for me, my background is actually in like systems change. It's in displacement. And so a lot of the work that I do stands to create spaces for people who have been displaced in one way or another, whether that's from a hurricane, whether that's from housing that's not affordable. I also work in a lot of the food sovereignty space. And so pretty much my day-to-day is very much so going into rooms and asking people why my community is not fed. And then once we get the answer to that, then challenging that and saying, okay, so let's get the work done, and let's figure that out. And so I get to do that, and a really beautiful organization pays me to do that. But then on the flip side, I do get to work with my siblings, where we're able to redesign spaces all across the city of Detroit for these kinds of things. We use recycled materials to as I mentioned, just create literal spaces for people to either grow food more efficiently or to keep their families safe.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so with that being said, who has a question for Amanda? Yeah.
So you talked about expecting that resistance when you disturb the peace. And I feel like anecdotally, right now, culturally, a lot of our discourse is as soon as that like moment of resistance happens, things sort of just like devolve into an argument. Like as soon as somebody brings up something that doesn't align with your worldview, and I don't mean yours specifically, but like that's when, the swords come out. In your work, how do you respond to that like alarm in people? And I'm anticipating it as something to do with like upholding that sense of love for humanity, but like how do you put that into practice to keep the conversation productive and like keep moving towards the place that you want to get?
I would say yes, you're right. In a level of it does involve love, right? As I mentioned, love in action, it requires a lot of different things. It requires commitment, it requires communication as well, and that's kind of the point I'll jump off on, where a lot of individuals are so uncomfortable with intimacy and so uncomfortable with having hard conversations that they don't have conflict resolution skills and they also don't have conflict management skills. Because at the end of the day, the conflict might not end. Like, you might not ever get to a point where you both agree. Now, if we're having a conversation about whether you think I'm a whole person, that's a different thing. And so, like, we're not going to come to a point where maybe we both agree on that, and that's a problem. I will say that a lot of folks don't understand how to manage a conflict while they're in it, and they're not okay with sometimes just leaving things where they're at and coming to a shared point of understanding and leave and moving on from there. So I think a lot of it is just being able to, as I said, manage the conflict, be able to communicate. I don't want to sit in a room with somebody who doesn't consider me a whole person or doesn't think that me and all my queerness should be on full display. That's just a personal thing. Like, who would want to be somewhere where they feel hatred towards them? But at the end of the day, I still have to come to it from a loving approach of, well, I can impart as much knowledge as I can into this space to get you to understand where I'm coming from. And I can sit here and listen to you so that you can give me your knowledge and I can understand where you're coming from. And then we can work from there. So I think a lot of it is just our ability to have real conversations with each other and to get down into what we're talking about so that we can get to the next thing. So yeah, you definitely will walk into a space where you're like, oh, now I gotta fight with these people. And it's like, you don't have to fight with these people. Like, we could just, put some things aside so that we can come to the table and actually have a real conversation. Whether or not we leave this space with us both feeling amazing and happy and we're gonna go get married now, that's probably not gonna happen. But I can still respect you as a person and you can respect me as a person given our different ideas and backgrounds and things like that. So I think it really just comes down to communication and being able to know the difference between resolving a conflict and managing a conflict.
Thank you.
Okay, who else has a question for Amanda? Here we go.
Thank you so much for the talk. I really appreciated it. Just coincidentally happened to be listening to a podcast on the way over here about the French Revolution. So when you said the word revolutionary, you kind of touched on that. I just wondered if you could explore that a little more from your perspective. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. I think it's really interesting that you were listening to a podcast on that. We're actually, I'm, I don't know, I'm a astrology gay. So I think about like just planetary alignment. I also use the planets to like help me plant my food throughout the year, like the moon cycles and things like that. So there is some science to this. But I'll say that we actually are living right now in the same alignment of the stars that guided the French and Haitian and American revolutions. So we're actually back in alignment with where we were at that time. And so when I'm talking about revolution, I'm not just talking about people going in the street and lighting stuff on fire or, screaming from the rooftops. I'm talking about a conscious revolution where folks are no longer going to just accept what they see, but they're willing to seek out the actual truth behind it. And so once you've sought out that truth, it's almost like you can't help but join the revolution, quote unquote, because at that point your mind is changed. Your vision is different. And so when you see it for what it is and when your mind has been transformed, that in and of itself is like a personal revolution. And I believe that when enough people get to that point, that's how we get a collective revolution. And we also see that happen on a global scale. I just believe that we're in a space where we see way more than we ever thought we were going to see, whether it's something really gruesome or something really beautiful. But being able to have a global connection to people and to be able to identify that my struggles here in Detroit are very similar to anyone across the globe who's living under an oppressive force, that right there and being able to make those connections is enough of a revolution for me to get up and do something. And it could just be me talking to you guys. It could just be me sitting in my friend groups and saying, I can't accept us sitting here and having a conversation about nothing right now when I just watched some children get burned in their tents. So like to be able to say it out loud, say the quiet part out loud kind of a thing. I think that that's really the revolution that we're talking about. It starts on a personal level, and we're seeing it really spread throughout the entire globe now, where people are just, when you see something, you really, what is it? You know better, you do better. So yeah, I would say that.
Amazing. Thank you. That's so insightful. Okay, any other questions for Amanda? Okay, I'm gonna pop over here first.
Thank you, Amanda. Ooh, sorry, I'm loud. Can you just? I just whenever you were talking, I heard a lot. I was looking at your art behind you. We talked about this before, but it really like resonated. Like when you talk about the planetary alignments right above your head, you talk about creating spaces. I saw like the mountain and you screaming, the face screaming, and then you're talking about vision and looking towards the future. Like all the figures are like looking at us, like we're the future. So can you just talk about a little bit about your art and how it shows up in the work you do, and your art shows up in the work you do?
Absolutely. So the style of art that I practice is Afrofuturistic art, and so I do that because I want to make sure that I can depict that Black people exist in the future, and that Black people have been to the future. And so I like to show that in my artwork. This piece right here in the back is actually part one to a two-part series. The first part of this one is called Grief. And so I depicted grief here because I felt like for me, when there's just like a moment of impact that begins the grieving process. And to me, it feels like the earth is like shattering. Like whatever your construct of the world was before this moment, whether you just got a call that someone died, or maybe you just got, it could be like you won $1 million and maybe now you're grieving like what my life was before I had this, right? So I wanted to depict just like this glass shattering here, and then just, yeah, that just full body scream of
Right.
now I'm in a new world, now I'm in a new life, and there's actually nothing that can quell this. I actually just have to live through it. And so you create a new world, you move forward, you do what you have to do, but at the end of the day, you still had this impact and like this moment that was your jump off for whatever your new world is. So I'll say, yeah, that's probably one of the bigger pieces that I have. The second part of it is actually called Closure, and it looks a little different. So this one's a sunrise and the other one's a sunset. And the sky looks slightly different, and it's not, it's it's like fractals, but it's not shattered. And it's a difference of being able to, it depicts someone standing in a space where they've got control over everything that's happening around them. And you're standing like on your own 2 feet, and you're in the new world that you've had to create out of whatever just happened to you. The other ones talk about different things. These two on the end are actually part of a series about the elements. So the one on the top is earth, and the one on the bottom is water. You can't quite see because they're behind here. And then these over here are off of two. So this one and this one. are from a series based off of the movie The Wiz. If you're familiar with it, there's a part where they get to Emerald City, and it's called Emerald City Sequence. It's a fabulous song. But there's three different parts. There's the red part, the green part, and the gold part. And so I wanted to depict the different elements in that song, but also in the visuals from that part of the movie where everything is like flashy and it's futuristic. And it was just my first introduction to Afrofuturism and black exploitation put in a space like that. But yeah, all of these in some way tell a different story just about life and how we get there, and it also just looks cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing out Amanda's art. I was going to be coming for that myself if not. Okay, so here we go to Marissa.
So you're a very activated person. How do you rest?
That's a great question. Well, let's see. So I am a Gemini, and I don't think we really rest. But I'm always on a quest for knowledge. So I think even in my resting state, I'm doing something that is I'm gonna like get some knowledge from. It might be like an audiobook or a podcast or something like that. But yeah, I've actually had to like be very intentional about carving out space for resting. I grew up in a religious practice that had us observing one day of the week that was the holy day, and so we weren't allowed to do anything but go and like read or like listen to non-secular music. I don't practice that religion anymore. However, I do still maintain one day a week where I just do me. I might be out on the farm doing something, but I'm usually like by myself and talking to my flowers or something. But yeah, I'm really intentional about carving out days of the week where I'm not, my phone's on do not disturb. Only my mom can call me, and I spend a lot of time maybe riding my bike or like going to Belle Isle. But yeah, I think because I am I do a lot of talking, and because I do a lot of listening as well, I try to carve out time where I'm not really doing either of those. I'm just existing as a person, and then yeah, just I try to spend a lot of time doing as the most eloquent way I can say it is gay shit. So I'll just go do things with other queer people and feel safe in that, and make art. So yeah, that's like my winter plan is to make more art all winter, and because I won't be outside talking to plants.
Great question, great answer. Thank you. Okay, any more questions for Amanda? Talked about a lot of things today. Okay, I have a couple for you. So, and I know this because we were chatting before we got started here, but you were telling me a little bit about spatial creative problem solving. And I know that we have a lot of creatives in the room, a lot of designers in the room as well. Will you provide a little bit of context to that portion of your work and some about what you were telling me this morning?
Yeah. Can you go further on that?
Yeah, so you were talking about, when you're planning like farms, for example, about how you don't want to necessarily destroy the earth in order to create those spaces.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll say a lot of, again, the way I mentioned before, our responsibility to ourselves shapes our responsibility to the rest of the world and to society. And I think that shows up in the way that we design for the future. More specifically, the work that I'm doing is a more community and earth-centered approach, so that I'm not tearing down community or the earth in order to build something for community and for the earth. I think that's probably the best way to put it. But yeah, just being in a design and development space, you can go anywhere, and especially with the buzzwords now, you can find anyone who's like, oh, I'm LEED certified, I do sustainability, I do this, I do that. But then you get into the space, and the material, while the lights might not be on all night, the materials that were used to build the space had to hurt the earth in order to be created. I also noticed too, more on the human level, that a lot of spaces are not designed for community. That's why you're seeing a big rise in third spaces, because people are realizing that they need connection and that they don't want to just like be a blob by themselves, and they want to like go be in a co-working space or They don't want to have to pay for coffee in order to just sit down and type a paper. They just want to exist. And so I spend a lot of time creating spaces like that. It might look like a park. It might, that's like, I think the best example of like a third space that's not you don't have to do anything in that space in order to exist. And so, yeah, a lot of the work that I'm doing is so that people can just exist as whole people and beings without having to pay a bunch of money in order to be there. But it all comes down to how we treat each other and treat the earth. And because of the history of this country, and honestly just the history of the world and colonization, we've taken this approach where it's us and then the earth. That's not the case. It's we're all one thing. And so positioning yourself and understanding who you are in the cycle of the earth, whether you're an astrology gay like me or you just like the seasons, right? But like taking the time to actually be part of the planet, I think it completely shapes how you show up in community and how you show up in society. So I like to just create spaces where people can find that and go back to their birthright, which is being a being of the earth. Walking barefoot, going camping, whatever you need to do, but just reminding people that like it's not us and them. We're all one thing. I firmly believe in the theory of One Health, which basically just talks about humans, animals, and plants all existing on the same plane. And a lot of people are like, well, a dog can't drive a car, so I don't think that really counts. But it's like, if you've ever had a pet and had to like experience pet loss, you understand that like their life was sacred. And like if you've ever grown food or maybe had flowers outside of your home and then it became wintertime and they all died and you felt something, it's because you were supposed to feel something. There's spirit that lives in everything, and when we honor that spirit that lives in everything, it translates into how we show up for a community.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Love how multidimensional you are with the art, the farms, like advocacy all over the place. Incredible. Amazing. I would just love to hear a little bit more about the farms, like what you guys grow, what you're doing. Like, it sounds like there's multiple all over the place in the urban development. Like, just love to hear a little bit more about that. Sounds super interesting to me.
For sure. Thank you. You're talking about my favorite topic. I love talking about dirt. So, we have designed spaces across the city of Detroit. Some of those look like farms, some of them are parks, some of them are just third spaces. But the space that I would say like holds my heart is the actual Finnegan's Farm, which is over in Dexter, Linwood area, right off of Monterey. So if you're over there, drive down Monterey, you can't miss it. There's a giant mural, and it's like a big ass farm. But when we're out there, we grow dyes, textiles. I primarily grow flowers, and then from those flowers, we do events and things like that. But we don't sell food. We grow food, and the community gets to decide what we grow. We do like a survey, or people will just like come by and say like, "Can you grow me some tomatoes?" But yeah, we grow food specifically for the community, and then it goes directly back to the community for free. So it sits on our farm stand, people come through, and then on Sundays, we typically do skill shares. It's cold, so I won't be out there. But before it got cold, we were out there every Sunday, and we would cook a community meal with the things that we're growing in the space. And yeah, it's kind of like our showroom, because there we have all of our different design elements present. So we're able to bring people out there, show them what we create, show them what we can do in their spaces, but then also explain like why we do what we do for our community. Finnegan's Farms also serves as a resiliency hub. It was like our first model for a resiliency hub. So in addition to having food growing there year round, we also have solar power and just different things that can help to support the community in times of crisis, even if sometimes it's just a community meeting space so that we can figure out what comes next. So I would say, yeah, we've been doing this for a while. My sister and I started like actively growing food back in like 2018, 2019. I was finishing up my master's degree, and it was all in like community resilience and agriculture, and basically how do we make sure that the food system doesn't get poisoned, and if it does, what do we do? and I was living in DC and was just like, we could probably go back to Detroit and figure out, like, we could go home. A lot of the time people talk a lot about displacement. They're talking about natural disasters, but they're not talking about man-made disasters and economic divestment. And a lot of what's happening here in the city is the result of economic divestment, racism as well, but a lot of funds being taken out of the city. And so when you are dealing with a community that sits in the ruins of a man-made disaster, what do you do next? You approach it from a few different levels, and food is one of them, but our farm is kind of like a front for us to be able to talk about liberation and building out sustainable approaches to how we handle those things.
Sweet. Thank you so much for that. Okay, any other questions? Anything else stirring up? Okay, cool. Then, Amanda, my last question for you. You mentioned obviously lots of book references. You're talking about podcasts. What are some of your favorite resources that you're constantly like absorbing that we might be able to spend some time on ourselves?
Okay, let's see. Well, I'm currently knee deep in Love is Blind.
Me too. Me too.
But I will say, I honestly, Bell Hooks and James Baldwin are two people that I hold as personal ancestors. We are not related. I would love that. But I hold them on my altar, and so their works definitely inspire a lot of what I do. Outside of that, I'm trying to think of like a really good podcast to give you guys that's not just like reality show gossip. Let's see. I don't know. I would say really just anything that honestly consume anything that's talking about getting us to the future that we desire. And looking that up, I do a lot of like, I don't know, I appear on a lot of podcasts. If you go to our website, you can find like the list. And all of those are podcasts that I would recommend. But yeah, anything that's like plant related or just about talking about how we get free. It can be very simple. But yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a
No,
specific
that's great.
reference.
That's good. Thank you.
And I'm sorry for the Netflix plug.
No, it's all good. Okay, amazing. One more round of applause, please, for Amanda. Thank you. Okay, and if you haven't already, please make sure you check out their art. We can scooch over the screens. Everybody can check it out. And thank you all so much for being here. We will see you next month, and we will share details on that soon.
Thank you, guys.